Tonight, of course, it's Survivor Series. It's The Undertaker's final farewell. It's 30 years of The Undertaker in the WWE, and it's a massive, massive deal. It really is a huge deal, and it's been hyped up. It's been, I think, to be honest, the biggest thing that's been talked about in the WWE sphere in the last sort of month or so, ever since it was announced that The Undertaker would be making an appearance at Survivor Series tonight, ever since it was announced that The Undertaker will be making his final farewell to the WWE at Survivor Series tonight. Obviously not on television. It's been referenced on TV, and there's been obviously a lot of stuff on the network and over here in the UK on BT Sport. It's been the Undertaker week. It's been 30 Days of the Dead Man on the WWE network. We've had a million different documentaries. If you've watched any form of news over the last month or so, you would have seen the Undertaker on it. He's been literally everywhere. That mystique of Mark Calloway, of The Undertaker transforming into Mark Calloway, has been happening before our very eyes over the last couple of months, to be honest, because it's been so much going on when it comes to The Undertaker over the last month or so. So it's very interesting. I think, to be honest, it's the thing that I'm excited about the most when it comes to Survivor Series tonight. Obviously, we've got some great matches for Survivor Series tonight, which I will be doing previews on as well, so be sure to check the channel out for that, especially the likes of WWE Champion Drew McIntyre versus Universal Champion Roman Reigns, the Raw versus SmackDown thing. That's great. I think what this entire pay-per-view is sold on and surrounded about is The Undertaker doing his final farewell. That's what it's really all about tonight, isn't it? Now, of course, what makes it so special is not only is it 30 years of The Undertaker and the 30th anniversary of The Undertaker in WWE, but the most interesting thing about it, I think, and it's not the most interesting thing, but certainly an interesting element of it, is that it's literally 30 years of The Undertaker to this day. He made his debut on the 22nd of November 1990. It's the 22nd of November today. 30 years later, he is going to be retiring from the WWE as well. It's just, I love stuff like that. I love the sort of interesting nuances of stuff like that. I always find that super interesting. And in terms of The Undertaker as well, he hasn't been featured on WWE TV since, of course, the Boneyard match at WrestleMania 36, where he defeated AJ Styles. Since then, he has announced his retirement on the Last Ride documentary, or at least tried to, for the lack of Vince McMahon trying to convince him out of it. But we haven't seen the Undertaker on WWE TV since then, so it's going to be the first time The Undertaker's appeared since April. And it's certainly going to be fascinating, because are we even going to see The Undertaker, or are we going to see Mark Calloway tonight at Survivor Series? There's so much in discussion for that. But a few interesting quotes. I was reading a piece that the CBS Sports did on The Undertaker, and he told CBS Sports this week that he's still coming to terms with his official retirement. There's a few interesting quotes here that The Undertaker said. He said, quote, "I'm kind of going through the whole gambit of emotions, really. I'm honoured that the WWE has taken this effort to honour me in this whole month with the documentaries and other things. It's really humbling that a company would do that. Not knowing exactly what the show is going to entail, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some of the guys I've worked with through the years there. It's definitely going to be bittersweet for me. It's one of these deals where I feel it's important that I'm there to address the fans and people who have been with me for 30 years and followed my career, and stuck with me when it's a flavour of the month business for a long time." He also said, quote, "It's going to be very emotional. It's all going to become very real that my career in the ring is likely over. So brace yourself for some dead man tears tonight, Survivor Series 2. He also said, "I'm just running the whole spectrum of emotions and trying to encapsulate everything and keep everything in check." Now, obviously for years at this point, there's always been this discussion of, would The Undertaker ever truly retire? I think there have been calls for The Undertaker maybe to hang up the boots, the hat and the trench coat for maybe 10 years at this point, possibly even longer than that. They really have. And I think there was some discussions that he might never retire, or the day might never come where The Undertaker would retire, and maybe he had outstayed his welcome when it comes to competing in the ring. What is interesting is that when asked by CBS Sports in this article that I was reading, there was this question of, would The Undertaker ever retire? And what's interesting was his response to this. He said, "The thoughts were already in my head that it was drawing near, his retirement." He also said, "I think the icing on the cake was the Boneyard match this year. I'm very proud of how that turned out and the reviews it got, but it was the end of that night and actually early the next morning and how I felt physically. Here you are, it's all over now, and you're walking like an 85-year-old man. It was just letting me know that the tank was pretty much empty. As bad as I hate to say that, it's just a reality that none of us can outrun Father Time. In the big scheme of things, I'm still relatively a young man, but in the world of professional sports and entertainment, I'm obviously in the twilight of my career. It became painfully obvious that my time had come, and it was time for me, as they say, to put my 6 shooters up on the mantle. So to me, when I think about this final farewell segment for tonight on Survivor Series, at Survivor Series, at the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida, for me, it feels like a real retirement. It does feel like a real retirement, and I'm glad that's the case. I really am glad that's the case. Now, obviously, there are certain connotations and feelings that something else might happen, but I do feel like this is a real retirement, and I'm glad that is the case because the documentary series, The Last Ride, it's fantastic. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. It's arguably the best documentary the WWE Network has ever done, and the quality of documentaries on the WWE Network are extraordinarily high. It's crazy the amount of quality and just depth, and just every single WWE Network documentary they do, they just knock it out the park every time. And I think the gold standard of that is the Last Ride documentary. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But the only thing that I disliked about the Last Ride documentary in terms of the content of it was the ending, where the Undertaker, he's basically announcing his retirement. He's announcing that I'm done. I feel like I have no desire to step in the ring again, I think was his words when he said during that time. But I hated the comment of, but you can never say never. If Vince McMahon is in a pinch, if Vince McMahon needs me, if in case of emergency, break glass and call for the Undertaker, or if Vince McMahon really needed me for a match, I would do it. I hated that. I absolutely hated that, because it was very, very obvious. It was very, very obvious. The Undertaker wants to retire and feels like he's done. As he said, he's got no desire to ever step back in the ring again. However, Vince McMahon doesn't agree with him for whatever reason and doesn't think that's the case. And I guess in his head, he thinks, well, I could probably convince the Undertaker to come back for one match if I really wanted to. If I really, really wanted to, I probably could. I think that's what Vince McMahon thinks of the Undertaker. So I hated that line, because I feel like at this point the Undertaker wants to retire. It's just Vince McMahon doesn't want the Undertaker to retire himself. The Undertaker should retire. He should retire. And I don't want to sound cruel and callous here, but the Undertaker said there, he did the Boneyard match and he was walking around like an 85-year-old man the next day. If that's the case, you probably should retire. He's 55 years old. He's been in the WWE for 30 years today. On this day, it's 30 years since he made his debut. That's 30 years in the WWE. Let alone pro wrestling, that's probably, more like 35 years? Maybe even longer than that. So the Undertaker, he's done his time. And he's got nothing more. As a fan, and I think this is important as well, as a fan, I don't want to see him in the ring anymore. I want to see him healthy. I want to see him with his family. I want to see him reaping the rewards of what has been an extraordinary career. There's a character that is unprecedented and will never reach the level of The Undertaker. No one will have that run ever again. No one will have the longevity. No one will have the streak at WrestleMania. No one will have any stuff like that ever again. The Undertaker... We talk about once-in-a-lifetime athletes and once-in-a-lifetime superstars. To me, The Undertaker is the pinnacle of that. No one is ever going to have the run like him. No one is ever going to have 30 years of being at the top. No one. It's just not going to happen. Even people like Triple H, maybe, but the whole time, The Undertaker's been working. Triple H hasn't. So nobody is going to be of that level again, and we should celebrate that. We shouldn't keep wheeling him out and putting him back in the ring. So I really do hope it's a real retirement. Now, in terms of The Undertaker, when I mentioned this retirement, The Undertaker's had physical issues and injuries and been winding down since the early 2000s. If you'd have asked The Undertaker in 2005 when he was on SmackDown, feuding against the likes of Randy Orton, Kurt Angle, etc., JBL, if you'd have asked him then, how much longer do you think you have left in the ring? He would have probably said maybe 3, 4, 5 years at most, maybe. Not 15, because that's what the case was. If you asked Undertaker how long he would have had left, he would have maybe said 5 years in 2005. 15 years removed, we're just getting to the Undertaker's retirement now. Which is crazy. It's just this insane, crazy, unbelievably long longevity that he's managed to achieve in the WWE, which, like I said, will never be replicated. No one will ever come close to that. Nobody. But now, the fact, like I said, he's 55 years old, he had the Boneyard match at WrestleMania, it's 2020 and the way that the lay of the land is going in WWE, and the way that the Undertaker, most importantly, Mark Calloway, has been stripping back. He's out of character all the time now. He's been doing these interviews. He's been eating hot chicken wings on Hot Ones. He's been going into Nando's and reserving seats. He's been going on Good Morning Britain over here and calling out Piers Morgan. All of this stuff. He's got a clothing line with Snoop Dogg at the moment. He was on Instagram Live with Snoop Dogg last night. That was a trip. If you watch that, my oh my. So to me, this feels like a real retirement to me. It really does. So in terms of what will happen tonight at Survivor Series, I think we'll get the Ric Flair retirement. I think that's what we'll get. And by the Ric Flair retirement, I don't mean that he'll have a retirement ceremony, get a Hall of Fame induction, and then come out of retirement 6 months later. What I mean is, I think we're going to get The Undertaker in the ring. Maybe he'll come out, do a promo, talk about the creature of the night, the fans, thank everyone, and then you get everyone come out. Like the same did happen with Ric Flair. Ric Flair, the night after WrestleMania 24 in 2008, he comes out, thanks everyone for the memories, and then out comes everyone. Triple H, Batista, the Four Horsemen, his family, Dean Malenko, even The Undertaker himself, Vince McMahon, they all came out, applauded Ric Flair, and clapped him off into retirement. I think we'll see a similar thing tonight at Survivor Series. I think The Undertaker will come out, he'll cut a promo, say thank you, thank the fans, thank Vince McMahon, thank the entire company, and then you'll get his family come out, so Michelle McCool, his children maybe, you'll get his friends come out, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, maybe even Steve Austin, all those guys, and then maybe the BSK members, I think they're rumoured to be there as well, so Savio Vega might be, I think is going to be there, Rikishi, I think even the Godwins are going to be there. In addition to that, you could probably have Kane come out. All of these guys will come out and they'll give him a proper send-off. And I think that's the segment that we're going to see tonight at Survivor Series. What is interesting, I suppose, as well, is you have to have the discussion of which Undertaker are we going to see? Are we going to see the dead man? Is he going to come out in the hat and the trench coat one more time? Are we going to see the American Badass? Because at WrestleMania this year, it was a hybrid version, but it was closer to the biker Undertaker that we have seen since 2004, since The Undertaker retired that character. It was closer to that, so maybe it'll be that version that we saw at WrestleMania 36. Will he come out on the motorcycle one more time? Or will we just see Mark Calloway? Will it be The Undertaker's music, but will it be just the Mark Calloway we've seen in interviews with the bandana and dressed up, not The Undertaker with the hat and the trench coat and the gloves? Who knows? Who knows? Because like I said, the reason I say which version of The Undertaker will we see, because The Undertaker has been doing a lot of press. A lot of press. I mentioned this at the top of the video here, that The Undertaker has been doing a ton of press. He has been on everything. As I mentioned, he's been on YouTube shows, cable news, British TV news. I mentioned he was on Good Morning Britain, BT Sport. He's been on conference calls, print media. He was in People magazine. He has been everywhere. I mean, I haven't seen WWE hype something like this up in a long time. This is like WrestleMania worthy hype. Even then, I'm not even sure WWE does that amount of press for WrestleMania. I really don't. So he has been absolutely everywhere hyping up this event, his final farewell, his departure from WWE, I guess in terms of storyline. And for 30 years, we've had The Undertaker do interviews. We had The Undertaker do interviews, and for 30 years, we haven't had The Undertaker do interviews, and it feels like at this point he's almost done 30 years worth of interviews in the last week alone, let alone the last month. So he's certainly saved up that entire time of not doing interviews. Certainly now he is doing interviews, and like it feels like, you know, you were always, for all these years, were desperate. Oh, I wonder what The Undertaker thinks. I wonder what he would say in this interview. I wonder what he would say about this. I wonder what his opinion is on this. And we've heard it all in the last month or so. It's been crazy. It really has. So in this final farewell, I think lots of people are looking into this lots of different ways. Does this final farewell mean we won't see The Undertaker on WWE TV again? I don't think that's the case. I think we will obviously see The Undertaker on WWE TV again. Especially when there are fans back. I can't imagine. I would be stunned, quite frankly, if The Undertaker says farewell to the WWE. One, he never appears on TV again, because it's not going to happen. But two, he never appears in front of a live WWE audience again. That would just be, I mean, it would be madness. It would be madness. So the idea of this whole, it's the final farewell and we might never see him again, that's BS. That's not going to happen. He signed like a 10 or 15 year deal with WWE back in 2019. It was called a lifetime deal because essentially it is. So The Undertaker isn't going to go anywhere just because he's having this final farewell. It just might mean it's an official retirement. He won't work matches, but he'll show up on TV. He'll be like Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, etc. when they retire, that they show up, maybe like Shawn Michaels hit a sweet chin music, or Steve Austin hits a stunner, or The Undertaker will come back, hit a choke slam and leave, or cut a promo or whatever. So I think that will be the case with The Undertaker going forward. It won't be his final farewell from the WWE or anything like that. But obviously, I think other questions you ask, and questions that will be asked about this whole final farewell segment is it a work? Is it a work? Because the nature of pro wrestling, the nature of WWE, everything, right? Everything, you have to question everything. Is everything a work? Now, we know that The Fiend is the big question here, isn't it? Because The Fiend isn't doing anything for Survivor Series, and The Fiend has been, or Bray Wyatt certainly has been, putting hints on social media or doing Easter eggs on Monday Night Raw with 1720 or something like that, talking about The Undertaker's original WWE debut on the 17th of November, so it was 1711, that's it, isn't it? So he's been teasing it as well, and The Undertaker's even said in interviews that he would love to work with The Fiend. He said that I would love to work with The Fiend, but he's kind of put an asterisk there saying I'd love to work with The Fiend if I was physically able to, or if I was 10 years younger, 5 years younger, we could do something amazing because he's the best character in WWE again. But what I could see if it was a work, The Undertaker could do this final farewell segment, as I mentioned, the same way that Ric Flair did. You have the family, the friends, the rivals, the colleagues, they all come out, and then it's just Mark Calloway in the ring. And he finishes the segment by doing the Undertaker Shakespeare pose to finish it and bid farewell to the WWE Universe. Maybe even Michelle McCool is out there as well with her husband to properly break kayfabe. And the reason why she's out there I'll touch on in a second. Suddenly the lights go out, typical of The Undertaker, but also typical of The Fiend. The lights come back on, and who else is there but The Fiend and Alexa Bliss. The Fiend attacks The Undertaker, Alexa Bliss attacks Michelle McCool. This then sets up The Undertaker versus The Fiend at WrestleMania 37 next year, inside of Raymond James Stadium with actual fans in attendance, because at this point it looks like fans will be back by then, if there is a vaccine, of course. This pandemic at this point is out of control all around the world, but especially in the United States right now. I was watching the news last night, and that's obviously talking about with Thanksgiving coming up and the holiday season and winter. It could and probably will, especially in the United States, but around the world get a lot worse. But the light at the end of the tunnel and the glimmer of hope there, of course, is this vaccine that's being spoken about, and there could be a chance that we have this vaccine widespread by the likes of April. WWE has been talking about delaying WrestleMania until April. Originally it was going to be in March, but they're talking about delaying it until April to have fans return in time for WrestleMania. Now, in terms of The Undertaker's send-off, as much as the Boneyard match against AJ Styles was the perfect send-off and the storybook ending for The Undertaker, what it wasn't, it didn't take place inside Raymond James Stadium in front of 60, 70,000 fans. The Undertaker had planned on AJ Styles being his retirement match at WrestleMania. He spoke about that. He planned on facing AJ Styles inside Raymond James Stadium. He planned on having that match on the biggest stage of them all, inside a stadium with 70,000 fans cheering him on, and he planned on having that match, and then that would be his retirement match. Instead of having that, The Undertaker had his final match on a small, closed set in Florida in the middle of the night with 20 people there, with no fans in attendance, and it was a cinematic match. It wasn't your traditional wrestling match either. And if you watched that Last Ride series, like I said, you know that The Undertaker is always looking for the perfect ending. He's always looking for the perfect ending when it comes to his career. Oh, I can't retire after WrestleMania 33. My performance was bad, I was fat, my hip was bad. Oh, I can't retire after WrestleMania 34 against John Cena. The match was too short. I need more. Oh, I can't retire after WrestleMania 35 because I missed it too much. I wasn't even on the show. I can't retire after the feud with DX because it was so bad at Crown Jewel. I can't retire after the match against Goldberg because it was the worst match ever. It was a disaster. Goldberg gets concussed and The Undertaker nearly dies. So finally, after this Boneyard match at WrestleMania earlier this year, finally it was critically acclaimed. It was a perfect story. It was a perfect match. It was as close to perfection as I think he would hope that he could get. But nevertheless, there will be something in his mind, in his head, that could say, I just can't retire because there were no fans there in my final match. And maybe it wasn't the complete perfect moment that he was looking for. Maybe there is something in his head that says, I just wish I'd have had that last moment in front of the fans. Maybe he'd have said that. And I think, in my opinion, the Boneyard match was way better than any Undertaker versus AJ Styles match would have ever been at WrestleMania 36. And if it had gone ahead as, if that match had gone ahead as normal, I don't think it would have been anywhere near as good as the Boneyard match. The Undertaker versus AJ Styles inside of the ring in your normal, traditional wrestling match at WrestleMania, it would have been okay at best. It would have been nowhere near as good as the AJ Styles versus Undertaker Boneyard match. It just wouldn't have. I don't think that would have been the case. I think the Boneyard match was a better match than the regular match would have been at WrestleMania. And then you have to question, a year after that, the Fiend versus The Undertaker, is that going to be as good as the Boneyard match? It isn't. I just don't think it would be as good as AJ Styles versus The Undertaker in the Boneyard match. The only thing that could take that over the edge maybe would be the atmosphere of a really hot electric crowd, but those WrestleMania shows, they're 5-6 hour longs. At points the crowd is tired, and if the match isn't good, how are they going to feel? And then what if something bad happens in that match? What if the match sucks? What if the match isn't good? Do we then start this cycle all over again of The Undertaker saying, well, I need the perfect match and I can't retire because this match was bad? And then he does the cycle all over again, and he's doing these matches where it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. That's why I think he should not cut his losses. I don't think that's a fair statement to say, but he should just go, you know what? I've got as good as it was going to be. I think that's it. But nevertheless, I think this retirement, it seems real. To me, it seems real. And, I wouldn't be totally against setting up the Fiend versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And I think it's real. I think it's real, and I don't want to see The Undertaker in the ring. I wouldn't bet against it, setting up The Undertaker versus The Fiend. I would be stunned because this is the WWE. This is The Undertaker we're talking about here. But for me, it does feel real. Maybe the Fiend will come out. Maybe he will confront The Undertaker, but maybe he just comes out and breaks character and pays respect to The Undertaker. Maybe The Undertaker does get attacked by the Fiend, though. Maybe the Fiend does attack The Undertaker, but it's just a way to write off The Undertaker character. Maybe it's a way of The Undertaker putting over Bray Wyatt on his way out. Either way, I'm going to put my neck out on the line, say this retirement is real. It feels real, so I think it is real. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on The Undertaker's final farewell to WWE tonight at Survivor Series? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys and chatting about WWE. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube, get up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.